Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, in case you have forgotten to count, 31st of November. We don't know how long this COP will last, but it is going to an end. And what we'd like to do this morning is, and I'm really pleased about all of you taking time. The competition got high for sessions. We try to make it an interesting session, is to talk about country perspectives. So we have some very interesting delegates lined up here. And implementation and how to prioritize climate action that countries have suggested already in their NDC and NAPs. Because it's really important to bring ambition setting together with implementation on the ground. My name is Julia Wolf, and I'm pleased to open the session. The session is organized together with Julie Tang from UNDP, United Nations Development Program, and I'm working for the Food and Agriculture Organization. So let's start the session. And we also have later in the session, we show you quickly the tool, but then we also show you how countries have used the tool already. So it's not just like a theoretical tool. That's the overview on the session. And we have the two country speakers from Cambodia and Mongolia. We have the Excellency Chan Phaloeum. I think you need to pronounce that yourself later, please. And we have Mrs. Tsogololma Nanja, right? Oh my God, I'm not earning a prize on that, I'm pretty sure. So, I think it has been said, and on the 19th, so that's 2 days ago, there was a whole day on food and agriculture, water, and many things have been said. But if you put the argument of agriculture, agri-food system in a nutshell, you basically work with three kind of key arguments. No? It's like, why is agriculture, agri-food system so relevant? Because we look in the whole package to up to 30% of the emissions, while we also have this high dependency of approximately 4 billion people depending on their livelihoods. So we all eat, so that's everybody, but we have 4 billion people depending with their livelihoods on agri-food systems. The second argument is that to fit the 1.5 degree bill, agriculture needs to be part of the solution. That's the 30%. And then it's also, and I'm sure you heard that many times, and we need you, all of you in the room, to advocate for that. Agriculture climate finance, and this is the finance COP, is only matching 4%, 4.3% actually of the global finance is going to agriculture. And only 1.4%, that's a number from IFAD, is going to the locals. So obviously we have a problem. While you can be as ambitious as you want, if the finances don't come to the people who really can do something with it, and that's not public sector. It's in some cases, mostly the private sector. It's the farmers, it's the cooperatives, it's the local banks, etc. All of this need to be mobilized to really make agriculture part of climate solution. So in total, that's another number I say for this introduction. We need 40% times more of climate finance than actually there is available. So with UNDP, already it feels like pre-COVID, which sounds a long time, in 2020, we created this program, which is really a dedicated support to countries, in this case 12 countries, of which we have 2 representatives here, to have a tailored approach on national determined contribution and national adaptation plans. And why did we think that was needed? It's because there was a lot of, there's some support provided, but it's just few programs that really have enabling activities for programs, which which then also complements, in many cases, the GEF and the GCF portfolio. But GCF and GEF sometimes is very dedicated effort to a certain region, etc. So what we feel or felt with UNDP, there need to be more enabling programs to really look at the ambition setting and to support countries to take NDCs the next step to implementation. So, exactly. And so in this case, that's just the concrete, yeah, exactly. So what you see here now is kind of an encouraging change, you see, so it was expiring in 2025. So now, with the German government's support, we were able to extend the program at this COP to 2028, so we can continue working with all of you. These are the countries. So next to the 12 countries you see here in blue, which are the core countries, we also created a private sector facility, which helps the additional countries here in the pink below with a small effort, which is up to 50,000 to engage with the private sector. And we are also very proud of that because it is going to the direction of discussing with domestic private sector and how to engage and how to create business cases and investment notes, plans to then create concrete action on the ground. For example, in the Solomon Islands, and there's a video actually available, we worked on biogas. That's something that the Solomon government wanted to move with the private sector. So now today is a very important event for us because we'd like to launch this climate action review tool, and my colleague Julie will take you through the details. And as I said in the beginning, why is that tool so relevant? Is because often in the NDCs you have this kind of washing list, without wanting to be disrespectful. You have this number of activities that kind of relate to targets, but the question, and we found that governments are kind of having difficulties to really prioritize the actions, not because you need to unpack the different activities into a list of priorities and where do you start and which funding comes into play. So that's why we created this climate action review tool, which was a lot of work to put it together, and we pilot tested it in some countries, and I'm really curious to hear, in particular from the countries who have pilot tested it, what's the level of experience and lesson learned, and maybe what else needs to be improved. So here you have a QR card, but we also have some cards, so you can take them or scan them if you'd like. These are the speakers, and I won't pronounce the names again. And I would welcome you to the panel. And now we have a small video for you. I don't know how to activate the video. Maybe the gentleman, the technicians in the back, could you play the video, please? So the video is an example from Colombia where we'd like to give you a quick zoom in into what we are working with countries. Can you pull it up? Is it possible? Do you click on it? Or should we move? Yes, it's coming. So sit back, relax, watch the show, and let us know what you think. Okay, sorry, it was, I actually thought we showed a video of Colombia, but that was just a tool. Okay, so with that, we go to the session. Julie, I hand it over to you, and you'll take us through the card tool.
Thank you, Julia. We thought, because this is part of the capacity building event, that we would walk you through a few of the elements and hope that you can access the tool online. I think, yeah, in this slide you can actually, no, not this slide, but actually, I'll just take you to the QR code so you can actually access the tool online if you want to start. Okay, so if you want to use your phone and access the QR code, it will help you follow my presentation a little bit better. I'll show this slide again, so if you haven't managed to do it, you can do it at the end of the session as well. So it will all look a little bit complicated, but actually we've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. We also serve as a help desk, so whenever you have questions, you can get in touch with us. And this tool, you can find it at the moment only on the FAO website, but hopefully very soon on the UNDP website. So the way it works is that it has 5 steps. And I know that a lot of users like this step-by-step approach because it gives you a clear pathway to how you can use any tool or like formulate documents, etc. So the first part is to prepare for an assessment. And I think this is really important because this tool, as was mentioned by Julia, was created in the framework of countries identifying their priorities and doing their NDCs, doing their NAPs, having those plans and those priorities and not really knowing how to take them further. And it's really important for us to have that first phase so that it's not really just experts-based, but it's also when you would also look at who should be part of this assessment, because this is not supposed to be a scientific tool. It's supposed to be a tool to make the prioritization a little bit more rigorous through a set of criteria, through a matrix that can help you score, but it's also a tool that is supposed to be participatory. So it's really about having some level of quantitative assessment, but also a big measure of qualitative assessment that is using as many stakeholders as you wish. And because this would be, in the first place, it's actually more of a government-driven tool, but it can be used by civil society, etc. But the idea is really to do it in a participatory manner. So the way you prepare for this assessment is that, as I said, because we're UN agencies, we usually work more with governments, but we believe this tool can be used by all. So one of a lead agency, so depending on the different countries, it could be from the Ministry of Environment, from the Ministry of Agriculture, but it could also be Ministry of Planning or any institution. It could also be at local level, would want to use this tool and start leading the assessment. And as I mentioned, this needs to be done in a collegial way. So you would prepare for the assessment with having a team, determining who would actually be implementing this tool, discuss what is the purpose of this assessment. So what do you want to prioritize to develop a project? Do you want to prioritize because you want to look at a specific sector or action that you want to unpack as part of a local development plan, etc. And you decide also on the modality, because I will explain later how this can be done offline, online, but also preferably through a workshop and through a multi-stakeholder assessment, but it's of course the country's prerogative. And as part of this first step, you need to collect the documents. As I will explain soon, the first step really is looking at your plans, and this is NAPs, but it can also be other types of climate plans, agriculture and climate sector strategies, etc. And so the idea here is that based on what you have in those broader plans, you would narrow it down to a sector or a subsector so that you can actually do some sort of scoring on a short list of action rather than the full menu of this whole wish list that you may have in your NDCs and NAPs. So the first step you'll see is when you go on the tool, this is done online. Sadly, we haven't figured out a way to be able to save, so you'd have to complete these steps in one go. Otherwise, you'd have to do them again. And that's actually why we have an Excel part of the tool, because we figured that the real scoring couldn't be done in one go, so you have this offline document that you can fill in. So the key documents, as I mentioned, are really the NDCs, the NAPs, but you can also include the LTS, and any other type of document, planning, strategy at country level, where those broad goals and sometimes more specific objectives that you want to reach in a specific can be found. And this is really in the process of preparing the assessment and looking at the key documents that you need to assess. So when you have this, you look at your NAP, you look at the agriculture sector of your NAP, for instance, and you will have a menu of options. And that's what you would start filling in the first column. So in many countries, you'll have something around increasing hectares of irrigation, you'll have something around resilient value chains, etc. So you would start filling them in on the first column. And we've figured a few different things that you would need to fill in to understand the objectives, to understand the scope, and that's all part of a first step before you go to the shortlist. With this, I will, to interrupt my quite dry presentation of this tool, we'll share some examples from our colleague from Mongolia.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm from Mongolia, and we just implement this climate action review in my country, and we're very happy because this kind of review can be used for any kind of, quite very comprehensive review guideline, as I suggest you. And how we did, I just explained in a very easy way. Very first, we just reviewed all our NDC documents, policy materials, and feedbacks from our main ministries. And the second, we again focus on NDC, particularly on agriculture, forestry, and other land use in base. And we just scored all of it. And we just prioritize by the scoring 5 or more than 6 issues, which can be done. And if the issue will be solved, it will be very transformative changes for our country issues. So after that, we just, these 5 issues again reviewed by the Scala kind of plan, work plan, and this kind of issue again reviewed, and we also have just 5 categories for our countries. So for these 5 categories, we thought it's our main issue, and we start do a planning, how we to implement, how to we focus on these issues. So, and
I think we'll hear more about Mongolia in the specific scoring a bit later.
Yeah. Scoring indicators, we found out 5 things like climate proof, small-scale fishers, livestock and lion degradation assessment, agroforestry, land use change assessment, drip irrigation system pilot, and finally we just, can I just talk about more what we did?
I think it'll be a bit later in the presentation. Thank you. So we'll get back to Mongolia a little bit later. So once you have completed this long list of adaptation priorities, the next step is to go to a short list with the idea of having a maximum of 5 options that you will be scoring in detail. And so through this step, There are three criteria. The first one is the alignment with the user's mandate. So depending on who's doing the assessment, which department, of which ministry, etc. Because the idea is for them to be able to, first of all, to be a bit more focused on what we do. Because again, we're trying to work out a way for countries to translate these really broad priorities into more concrete actions, and having that mandate of the user align with the option that it's looking at ensures that they have the expertise, that the people that they can gather to do the assessments are relevant for a more rigorous process of assessment. The second criteria is that it's aligned, is a similar issue, that's aligned with the sector or the subsector. So for instance, if this is done by someone in charge of the Department of Fisheries, that the options that they're looking at are only on fisheries. And the third one is also similar. It's about the geographical scale. Again, that if it's a local level planner, that we're looking at adaptation options that are relevant for their area of competency. So to do the short list, again, we've tried to make it looks a little bit complicated, but actually it's quite an easy drop-down menu. So the idea is, again, to help users just select based on a set list of criteria and factors that we've identified. And actually, once you start using it, if you have ideas to improve it, please send us some ideas. So you have your long list that you identified in the first step. And here you will start looking at this long list to start narrowing it down. And in this step, we're trying to look at the gaps in the implementation. And it's important because, again, we know that resources are getting scarce, that as part of certain, if you're developing a project, if you're developing a local plan, you can't always take everything, and you have to narrow it down to a key priority. And it's the whole point of this tool, that we're narrowing it out to priorities that have this transformative potential, which will be scoring in the next phase. So you would end up this step 2 with 5 priorities. Again, I think we did this because based on our experience, when there were more than 5, the scoring got really complicated. So we recommended to do 5, and I think in the tool that you can find online, it's only 5. So in this case, you can see a few of the examples. And on the right-hand side, again, it's very important because we've noticed that sometimes there's a misalignment between the priority actions that may be in one document that are not in the other document, and actually even more so, a misalignment between what you have in your NAP, but what actually ends up being developed and prioritized for projects, because we know also a lot of projects can be more donor-driven, whereas the NDCs, the NAPs, they're more country-driven. And so it's really important in this process that this is aligned so that countries can set their priorities through those nationally determined contributions, through the NAPs, and that this is what donors would end up prioritizing instead of a process where that is a bit loop-sided and not fully country-driven. So the step 3, as I mentioned in the beginning, the stakeholder part is very, very key, because we also know that implementation happens at local level, that you need all the stakeholders to have ownership of the initiatives, and we also want those solutions that are identified to be relevant for the communities that will benefit from it, for the different stakeholders that may be required to support the implementation, and that can include the private sector, it would include some cooperatives, it would include women's groups, etc. So it's important to do this mapping at this stage once you have your long list. This is, as I mentioned, the different types of stakeholders you could have, and it's important to have as wide a range of stakeholders as possible, again, to make sure that the options that are identified and prioritized and scored through this assessment process are as relevant for as many actors as possible, again, to really enable that transformative potential. So in step 4, this is when it really starts, and step 4 is where you would be able to download this Excel file. You can access it through the website and the link that I shared. And this part, preferably, would be done through a workshop, so that you actually find when we have a handbook that accompanies the tool and that would guide you in how this workshop can be conducted, so that you can gather the views of the different stakeholders in the best way possible, and so that the assessment, the scoring, can actually be done in this collegial manner. You can also, if you cannot do a workshop. You can do a desk review, and that would be more like an expert's review, where you, preferably again, it would be more done in a collegial manner than by just one person. But ideally, at least you would sit down with a few key people from your local institutions, from your department in the ministry. If it's done by an NGO, by a few people that represent different types of expertise, so you would still preferably have someone with gender expertise, with expertise on other vulnerable groups, an economist, an agronomist, of course, etc., so that even if it's not done in a workshop with a wide range of stakeholders, you have those different factors that are assessed by the different experts. So the crux of the matter is the dimensions of transformation, because again, Scala is about fostering transformation. It's about translating the NDCs and NAPs into those actionable and transformative solutions. And we identified 6 dimensions of transformations. And while I know transformational adaptation has been a big part of the discussions here, we designed this tool 3 years ago, actually, when we started. So those dimensions were based on the literature review that we conducted and on the Scala theory of change. I think they're more or less aligned with the discussion on transformational adaptation, but this is our interpretation of how we could narrow down transformative actions as part of our program. One is a climate rationale. It seems obvious when we talk about adaptation, but actually having worked on adaptation now for over 10 years and having looked at lots of projects, this is sometimes missing, quite honestly. And so it's really important to look back at the risk and vulnerability assessments and looking at those options that are adaptation options that of course have development benefits, but that come from the risks that climate change poses to your specific sector or subsector. You can see here also the whole of government. I've been talking a lot about multi-stakeholder collaboration, but that's really because this is key for the actions to be implemented and to make sure that they're transformative in the sense that they really would address as wide a range and as systemic a change as possible. Private sector engagement, I know this was also, that this has also been a little bit contentious in the last 2 weeks, but we see them as important, especially when we talk about food systems, because they're obviously a very key player along the value chains. And they're important not to define the priorities that the countries have, but they're important to see how they could themselves also implement some of these actions and provide some of the resources, but also just take action in their own value chains that can help advance the adaptation goals for a country. Technological innovation is also key. There's a difference between innovation and transformation, but innovation can also help scale up adaptation action. Gender and in general inclusivity are really key, again, because those vulnerable groups need to be part of the designing and the implementation of the solutions, and they need to have ownership of those solutions. And finally, sustainable development broadly, and that's meant to be that the options need to be aligned with the national development plans and the broader development goals of the country. We set up a different scale that you can see on the right-hand side. So based on that, countries or the stakeholders would fill in the matrix, put the scores based on the transformative potential that they assess on these 6 dimensions. And through our tool, you would come up with some of those graphs that can help you visualize how high certain options will score as opposed to other ones, and on each of the different dimensions. I'll give you a few minutes to look at this. So you can see that some options would have a stronger impact on inclusivity, but they may have less of a private sector potential, while some options might actually tick all the boxes, and some others might have very big economic benefits, mostly, but they might have less of a climate rationale. This is also to show you what can come up, and I'll go back to our colleague from Mongolia to explain how the scoring was done.
Yeah, from this you can see that the 5 priorities can make a transformative changes. So this is the activities, and we also scored by Scala mapping also climate rationale system approaches, private sector engagement, gender equity and social inclusion, sustainable development, whole of government, technological innovation, and we just did the scoring. And by prioritizing by the score, we start implementing and our goals to which way to start, right? Okay, next slide, is it?
I think there's only one.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 And I can more slides again.
I think I'll get back to you a bit later.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, this was just to have a bit of an example from Mongolia, and you can see there that a few options had a very high score, and in Mongolia, that's actually what we took to then design the work plan for Scala in Mongolia. Step 5 is really important, and that's linked to what I just said. This is about implementing. And to implement, you need some sort of, well, you can call it a roadmap, an action plan, etc. We call it a roadmap. And again, this really needs to look at what priorities you've identified. So in Mongolia, it was livestock, for instance, and then look at what type of actors can support, what type of actions you need to be able to unpack this. I'll give the floor later to our representative from Mongolia, but in the Scala case, for instance, that meant that we would look at the evidence base that needs to be done. So if livestock was prioritized, then what are the risk and vulnerability assessment that exist for livestock? What are the value chain analysis that might have been done? What are the analysis that might have been done also on the mitigation potential of work on livestock? Then there's a governance part where you would look at what are the enablers that would facilitate for this action to be scaled up and implemented. So you would look at the different, at your governance framework. What is said in your agriculture plan, what is said in the national development plan, how you can actually integrate those actions into those plans. You can look at some of the barriers that might be also regulatory. So maybe you need like a tax on livestock emissions, for instance, or on livestock in general, etc. And then the third aspect would be around resource mobilization and private sector engagement. So once you have these priorities, once you have the evidence base, once you have your enabling environment and the governance framework that allows you to go and get this implemented, where do you find the finance and what do you need to do that? And for that, you may have to look at what are the private sector actors that are working on this value chain, what are the risks, the barriers that they face, how together we can co-design solutions. And also that's where it always ends up in projects in development. So that's where you would end up also developing concept notes, finding financiers to be able to implement those actions. So I'll give the floor to our representatives to elaborate a little bit on Mongolia.
Thank you. Okay. We just did, based on the car matrix results, Scala Mongolia takes action to help provide future targets in the NDC sectors. This includes assessment for the overview system, analyzing barriers, and engaging in activities like open discussion, consulting with the multiple stakeholders, and building capacity for agriculture and land use MRV systems. System-level assessment, we just did national stakeholders use information and assessments to identify and evaluate climate action that can advise in advance, prioritize in land use and agriculture, as outlined in the national NDCs and NEP as for the Scala. And we can see that in systematic level assessment, 5 system-level assessments were conducted. First is livestock tax law implementation, which we already finalized. And second, identify fruit and berry trees, seed varieties with high adaptive potential to climate risk and sustainability analysis. In my country, I can just explain that we're building 1 million trees, and some bushes is not counted like a tree, so we just start to count this and fight for bushes. So, and this is kind of identifying fruits and berry trees needed to be assessed where to plant. Otherwise, you know, they cannot be fruitful for every place. So this is done. And feasibility of establishing forest strips around arable land, and also it was very important thing. We did with the FAO, and still it's ongoing now. Next was assessment of the surface water harvesting structure. We just did finalized with the UNDP together, and national market schemes in partial carbon sequestration. We just finalized with UNDP too. Also, we did a barrier analysis. Scala Mongolia identified key steps to reduce financial risk and develop business opportunities in the leather sector with UNDP. We also established forest strips and around farmland with FAO. Yeah, is it? Yeah, just for now this. And also we did some more activities like Scala team reviewed and consolidated adaptation actions for the agriculture sector planning during the workshop. And we just organized many workshops related to this review and what we have done. So we also just planning. Can I almost slides? Okay. Also just planning gender responsible climate budgeting training for financial officers for main ministries, and updating NDC livestock targets for the NDC 3.0, and also defining forest strips around the farmland. So still we just continuing this kind of review and just finding and scoring. It can be, you know, used for every time activities which we want to further can implement.
Okay. I'll also turn to Her Excellency Chan Palan from the Ministry of Agriculture in Cambodia to also share a bit of their experience.
Good morning for everyone. I'm very grateful to participate for this seminar. So that for according to our friend beside me, explained about that what is happened in Mongolia. But now I think that Cambodia, we also like similar to the case of Mongolia. So in this, I think that for Cambodia, we work it is a long time. So that I think that we have prioritized for the action, climate action prioritized. And the first we have just started around 30 number, and then we discuss among our stakeholders so that stakeholder that we can reduce up to the 23. Among the 23 action priorities, so that we have adaptation of in crop base, so that we have only 15 action priority. In this, how the way we do it, I think that in Cambodia, we just work for that by 3 steps of working, so that the step 1, we prepare the assessment to assess the priority area to support the need of agriculture sector. That means we base for the priority crops. And to support value chain development in agriculture sector. If we think about the agricultural sector, not just only crops, we work for the crop, animal health, fishery, and forestry. And this, I think maybe we just looking for on one thing, subsectors. So what is we are going to do? You see, like we review all the management document example, like review of pentagonal strategy phase 1, because right now we have new term of the royal government of Cambodia, so that we start from the pentagonal strategy phase 1. And second, we review for the Cambodia and NDC And the third, we are looking for the long-term strategy and other relevant climate priority of the royal government of Cambodia. And for the step 2, I think that we need to identify the adaptation priority action measure within the policy as well as in current investment and under adaptation priority action. In this, I think that we still have work because you see, like on the first on this step, we think that for this activity for the priority action, for each priority action, we can make as a project, or we can make for concept note. It is very useful, but I don't know. We just started, so I think that we don't know exactly what is can make that to gain for economic growth or not yet, because just first step to identify. And this, I think that in Cambodia case, we're looking for the review of this priority action plan. And on the third step, I think that we made a short list of adaptation option and priority to be used, mobilize all resources, and with the relevant department, relevant of development partner and donor agency, such as World Bank, ADB, etc., and a long list of measurements selected for the national priority action. In this the way I will do it, and I hope that when we go back, we want to make selected, because you see, like right now, like UNDP support and work with the FAO to support. We want to work in the ground truth level, because we want to make sure that how this priority action is good, or we can make innovation after that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With this, I'll open a Q&A session, if you have any. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Joel. I come from Nairobi, from the African Center for Technology Studies. I was curious about the tool, specifically on how it takes care of coherence at a horizontal and vertical space. So whereas climate change and climate action are often systemic issues, where the actions you take affect business, affect other sectors, how is the tool taking care of this kind of coherence? Because an action, be it in agriculture or in livestock, might have implications in other sectors, negatively or positively. But how is this kind of a synergy potential, or even antagonistic kind of potential, taken care of?
Thank you. There's another question there, and I can start. Julia, there's a question there. Yeah, to answer this question, so actually, interestingly, when we first designed the tool, actually, especially when we applied it within Scala, because now this tool is also to be used by any users, but we first created it for Scala to design the work plans. We had the systems, we had systems level as one of the transformative areas, but then we realized that actually it was kind of duplicating the other criteria, because the whole all the dimensions are supposed to be part of what makes something a systems level action. So I think from your question, I would say that the way we do it is not at the scoring and at the identification and assessment of the action, but it's actually in the actions that follow. So, for instance, if a country like in Côte d'Ivoire, for instance, one of our countries, we identified cashew and cassava as the two, and making them resilient as the key priority actions. And after that, we unpacked it with the countries in looking at doing value chains assessments to make sure that we had a whole, a really good overview of what was going on at the different chain levels of the chain. We make sure that we also assess the economic impact, the social impact, etc. So it's more in the following actions. But we considered in a sense that it was, the tool was more usable if the dimensions were those 6 dimensions that are part of what makes an action transformative. The systems level aspect was a bit complicated for countries to assess, I think.
Hello, I'm Reyes Tirado from Climate Bonds Initiative. Super interesting session. Thank you so much for sharing the examples. In Climate Bonds, we work for setting criteria and standards for investments that then can be private, public, or blended. So I was wondering if you have things to share in terms of how are you financing the actions that you're putting here, in terms of from sovereign funds perhaps, or how do you include the private sector also in raising the funds that you need for implementation of these actions? Thank you.
Thank you. Would one of our, yeah, if you want to.
Thank you so much for your question. I think that among of this, like Cambodia, we have priority action to, we just call like stakeholder, stakeholder meeting. So that this, I think that we invite all the relevant institutions such as the development partner, private sector, and public sector. And also like community, because you see like in Cambodia, we have for the crop sector, we have over 1,200 agricultural cooperatives, so that they involve for in the community. In this, I think that the way how to do it, you see, we just started now, because you see like if we looking for the long term, you see like looking for in the past, so that private sector in Cambodia is still very weak, because you see like private sector need support from the government. But now I think that they have, like the government of Cambodia start to invest, to shout for the international investor. In this, I think that we have several of investors. They start to use to use how to. The first, I think that they have LOA with forest like fishery administration, to use how to grow of mangrove, so that the mangrove trees, you see like we can sell for the carbon credit, and the way how to get finance from the private sector. And the other, I think that the Ministry of Environment, they sell for the carbon credit, so that we got the budget from them. Thank you.
Okay, for Mongolia, we just mentioned 5 pilot projects, which, you know, this kind of projects just helps us for developing policies, which is directly influences to private sector. And just we issued a new policy that most of activities which cannot be done by the government, transferring to NGOs and private sectors from beginning of 1st of January 2025. So in this case, for example, I mentioned you about the berry bushes. We just identified the places where we can grow this kind of special berries. So under this kind of mapping, the private sector just start to treat the trees, for example. Or we just livestock tax law implementation. It's also just the directly influences to private sector and NGOs who working on it. So now also we have a national market streams in pasture carbon sequestration, which finalized recently. So this kind of pilot projects influences for every activities, not only for government, and also for private sector, NGOs, and activities who are going to be done in this sector?
Thank you. Well, the whole Scala program and having this climate action review matrix applied at the beginning really stemmed from the fact that, I work on this program, but I work more broadly at UNDP, and we do a lot of programming, and we've noticed that there was an appetite from financiers, be it public or private, but they always complain that there's no pipeline. They say there's a UNAP, UNDCs, etc., but they don't translate directly into something that is investable. So we thought that this tool could help unpack this by as a first step, having a more rigorous assessment of what those priorities could be and converting it into something tangible. So in this case, for instance, we really work on livestock, and both on the mitigation adaptation side, make population more resilient, but also reducing the emissions from livestock. And really building the different blocks that we think are often missing in our conversation with financiers. So the evidence base, be it the climate risk part or the economic financial analysis part or the gender social inclusion part, etc. But another part that was really crucially missing was that often we would go to private sector financiers or investors in actions, like it could be banks, but it could also just be a big company that would actually purchase and then maybe de-risk their own supply chain. And that would come at the end. But we realized that a lot of them, when we talk to them, would say, well, actually, there are a lot of barriers that need to be addressed over a course of 2-3 years. If it's a regulatory barrier, if it's a fiscal barrier, all this needs to be identified early on. And we know that government processes take time, so this needs to be addressed over a couple of years at least, at the beginning of the design rather than the very end when you're about to submit. The other thing is, our role as UN agencies is really to support the government. So what we focus our support on is really to look at how they can engage the private sector and what type of information they can share with private sector, what type of policy, regulatory barriers they could help alleviate, how they can establish that dialogue for the private sector to invest. And in the different countries where we work, it really takes different forms. So I think in Senegal, for instance, we're working with a direct access entity to the GCF, and we're supporting how they can, and it's a bank, so we're looking at how they can raise money from the GCF with grants so that they can actually then loan to the smallholder farmers that are their customers and de-risk this investment. In some other countries, it's actually more around standards. So for instance, Costa Rica, we're working on more sustainable beef production, and the government had established a standard. And thanks to Scala, we've been supporting the piloting of this with giving some seed money for the different herders to be able to apply these standards, make their production less emission heavy, and see if it works. And then once, like now we have some really good results from the pilots, and it will be now, the standard will be officially adopted, and hopefully that's how Costa Rica can demonstrate this benefit and go and find some investors in some of their livestock farms.
Hi, thank you so much for your very interesting tool and session. Really enjoyed it. I have a question more for clarification. It's just probably I don't understand. So you have in your tool as the input, the suggestion, a list of adaptation or mitigation actions, right? To me, it seems like a critical step in implementations and how these actions that are already actions that are listed in the tool are then translated to measures such as in the Mongolian case, the livestock tax, the identifying of the berry species and things like that on a very local level. To me, there seems to be some kind of and that's the result, if I understand, of a system level assessment. To me, that's the magic, right, of what this example being so well is that the government, for whatever reason, is able to translate something that actually sounds to me more like a target, like that you list as actions, how they translate that into the lower level. So could you share, or maybe from the Mongolian case, how you actually translate the left side column of the adaptation action exactly into then what that means for the leather industry in Mongolia. And I understand there's a workshop, but what is actually the link between that and another type of action?
Would you like to answer on Mongolia?
Yeah, of course, we have a lot of problems, so we need to start with something, which is more, and everybody just arguing in their own sides, that must be first. They must be first. So by reviewing all these issues, which we already in the policies, which might be in all laws, or maybe all in negotiation, we just start scoring. So in a way, is it gender-based? Is it like, in all 7 categories, and just score by themselves? And finally, the scores coming, and we just see which priorities focusing most for the people. So again, this the issue which was maybe 10, again scored by Scala, this kind of guidelines again. So finally, we just find out that 5 issues must be give a value on in a policy level, or in just try to make in pilot projects to try to see is it real or not. So just this kind of pilot projects helps us to see it's more narrowed down scale. So we just found out maybe we're just missing a policy, or maybe in the implementation. So this guide very helps to guide the countries which way to start, and maybe after we can again scan our activities again. So this kind of scanning tools helps countries to prioritize the issues. So from my perspective, review can be done not only in the climate, or maybe in other sectors as well. So in this perspective, these tools very helps to countries. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, I mean, this tool is really to help unpack what you have in the NDCs and NAPs, and especially with this transformative lens, because the idea is, I mean, you could continue with business as usual and do some irrigation here and there and do some resilient seeds somewhere, but the idea is to really look at the landscape or look at the value chain. And so this tool helps in prioritizing these actions that have this transformative potential. But the next step, which, as you pointed out, is not automatic, is defining what you need to then implement. This is what we do in step 5. So it's through this definition of the roadmap. So in the countries where, for instance, in Côte d'Ivoire, for instance, where they identified cashew, then as part of step 5, it's like, what do we need in step 5? So as I said, it's like, do we need more risk and vulnerability assessment, or do those exist? Do we need more value chain analysis? Do we need to do a more thorough mapping of what is already ongoing in this value chain? And that's what you would put in your roadmap. In our case, because it's a project, we would do it as part of a work plan, but that's part of and the handbook that we provide actually defines this a little bit better. But this is not really part of the tool, which is really just to unpack what you have in the NDCs and NAPs and look at how you can further prioritize to look at one specific action that has this transformative potential.
Thank you. My name is Chivan Leng from Cambodian, from Ministry of Environment, Cambodia. I understand that CAR tool was developed by UNDP and FAO actually, and we are Ministry of Environment, also Ministry of MAP Cambodia, also working with UNDP and FAO in Cambodia to support Scala project as well. So my question maybe is go to the organizer, whether Scala can provide technical support to the country where Cambodia will develop our update NDC in 2025. So if you can consider technical capacity building support through Scala project in Cambodia, I think would be appreciated. Thank you.
To answer this really quickly, yes, part of Scala is definitely the idea is to unpack the NDCs and apps, do whatever you need to clarify, to build the evidence base, etc. But of course, it should feed back into your next NDC, and you can approach the UNDP and FAO country office because we have a budget line to support the NDC revision under Scala. But more broadly, UNDP and FAO also provide support on the climate forums for UNDP and a help desk with FAO on NDC revision. So absolutely approach us and use Scala or contact our country offices for broader support on NDCs. Sorry.
I think if you could consider us putting in a capacity building agenda, and it would be appreciated. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we're out of time, so I'll let Julia conclude. Thank you very much for your questions and for following this event.
You can also stay. So thanks so much. I know the time is up. It has been a really interesting session. I really loved the concreteness, and I think we had excellent speakers. So thanks so much to the ladies here on the panel. And you said you really were open to share what are some of the bottlenecks, no? I mean, as you say, there's a lot of problems, right? So obviously the tool is not a perfect solution. We're learning in progress. We heard that very clearly. I think if countries are interested or if here agencies where you do similar exercises, it would be interesting, please write to us because it would be nice to learn also from others who do similar tools. What we are proud of, though, I would say, is it's really one of the few tools that do exist in the prioritization, not because there's a lot of tools to do many things, but this is really one of the tools which we developed through the program. So it's not like some desk work, university kind of exercise. It's really developed with the countries and picking up what are the weak points in terms of the planning and the complexity, no? Because in the end, we have a problem of complexity, and we heard that. No? I really liked your intervention in terms of it can also be cross-sector, no? And now with the increasing importance of NV subs and the biodiversity, it's actually something that will also bring into this next phase of Scala, which is extended under 2028. We'll be looking how this prioritization tool can also consider more nature-based solution and biodiversity aspects in the nexus with climate, in the nexus with water possibly, right? So please continue sharing with us and let's continue learning all together how to really cut transaction of planning, cost time, and we need to learn from countries how to best move forward on closing the gaps and needs and ultimately link the planning to finance and implementation. So thanks so much. So on both our behalves, FAO and UNDP, we're here to engage with you, and thanks so much for attending the session. Should we do